up, nerds? My name is Leslie Smith. Welcome back to the Nerdy Narrative. My gosh, it's been forever since I have done one of these. I elected not to film while I was at home visiting in Mississippi the last few weeks. I just dedicated that time to visiting with friends and family. Because I was there for so long, I even got to do a couple of runs with my old running group. It was a lot of fun. I am really glad to be home, back in the saddle. I've now lived out of Mississippi long enough that when we went home and got out and about, I was getting tickled at listening to other people talk around me. There was one guy who was talking to his girl, and I swear he gave the word road at least 5 syllables. It was absolutely hysterical listening to people talk, just how long they would draw out a word and how differently they pronounce stuff. And there is a difference between Southern and redneck. A Southerner would say, we're gonna go down by the creek, and a redneck is gonna say, we're gonna go down by the creek. It was so good to be back home, but now I'm back in Florida. We're here. We're going to talk about all of the books that I read, the ones I finished right before I left, the ones I read while I was gone, what I'm still working on, and what I plan to read next. So let's get started. Since I have some physical books here, let's just start with those. I finished Cherry Blossom, book 3 of the CAWPILE series by Wilbur Seymour before I left to go home. This one I rated 3 stars. Now, the first thing I need to bring attention to, if you are a reader that has content or trigger warnings that you look out for before reading a book, I am quite sure that one or more of those is in this installment of the series. If you are someone who does not like a ton of foul or crude language, this is not the book for you. This one, unfortunately, is in a very small niche. In fact, I almost put it down, and I did tell the author. We did have a discussion about this book, and his purpose, his intent was to write completely outside the box and just do something different. He absolutely accomplished that goal. There were things that I did enjoy that did carry the main plot across for the series, so I did want to push through. I'm glad that I did. I will never reread this book. I would absolutely reread book 1 and 2. I took a lot of notes so that I could just skip this one and go right into the 4th book, which I'll be picking up next month. So I'm excited to see the conclusion of the CAWPILE series. So that is Cherry Blossom by Wilbur Seymour. Next, I read The Sword of Mercy and Wrath by N.C. Kusis. This one has been entered into SBF BO9. Fun fact, while we're talking about it, in addition to my 6 books that I'm reading for Team Bookborn for SBF BO9, I have, I think, around 12 books that are also entered that I'll be reading over the next year that's in the competition. And these were all already scheduled to read and review before the competition even opened. So y'all are going to get to hear about a bunch of SBF BO9 reads. Now this one, because it's not for my team, I am able to go ahead and tell you my star rating for it, which is 4 stars. My star ratings, I calculate using the CAWPILE method, which is I rate each of the 7 elements 1 through 10. I average those out to get a star rating. I'll put a link to the CAWPILE method below if you're interested in reading more. So this one I gave 4 stars to. I'm really excited to read the 2nd book in this series to see where the author is going to take this one. I'm hoping for more character development. This story is told to us in 2 points of view. We have Tristane and we have Celine. Celine gets some amazing character development and growth over her arc in this story. I absolutely loved it. Tristane was the character I was more interested in, and he didn't get the same attention that she did, if that makes any type of sense. In fact, there were a lot of secondary characters I would have liked a little more information on. So I'm hoping in book 2 we're gonna get more character development across the board rather than just one. I know that sounds negative. It's not. It's just that he did so good with Celine's character. I want to see more of that from more characters, if that makes any type of sense. A couple of quick things I really enjoyed about this book is that it is about werewolves, no vampires. I can't think of a single time I've read a book about werewolves that didn't have vampires involved. The lore and the story always seems to be built around this fact that the only time you're going to encounter a werewolf is because vampires have shown up, because they're mortal enemies. There was a very interesting history and lore about where the werewolves came from that I really enjoyed seeing. I really enjoyed the religious system that was built in this world and the order that was created to hunt werewolves, because they're seen as a curse, as being evil, they're demons. This Order of the Golden Sword goes about hunting them. This order does this with impunity. They answer to no higher power, and what they do with that power, you can imagine what that means. It's so good. It's so good. And then the other thing that I really loved about it is Celine is injured. She loses an arm, and the author goes into detail how she learns to live without an arm. She doesn't see it as a disability. In fact, she gets so used to operating without it that she doesn't even realize that she's missing an arm. Now, I'm not saying that he just glosses over it. She does have a learning curve where she has that phantom limb thing where she just tries to reach for something and she forgets that she doesn't have an arm, and she'll fall over. She'll go to mount a horse and forget she doesn't have that arm and like go over the side and fall off. I really appreciate showing just that learning process and that it's not seen as a disability. It was just very well done in my opinion. Next, I finished book 2 in the Legends of Lightning series by T.R. Sloth. This is called Redemption. Oh my gosh, everything I wanted in book 1, I got in book 2. It was so good. I gave this one 4 stars. I am so excited for the 3rd book. I believe this is going to be a trilogy, so that'll be the end of this one. I cannot wait to see what's going to happen. This series is a very dark fairy tale retelling. If you love fairy tale retellings, but you don't like grim dark fantasy or horror, stay away from this one. It is not for you. And that darkness, that grittiness, the horror of it is probably why I love it so much. I have typically not enjoyed any type of fairy tale or Disney retelling books that I've tried. There's a whole series that Disney puts out called Twisted Tales. I have not liked a single one of those that I've tried yet. I believe that's because I grew up hearing these fairy tales and watching these Disney movies for 40 something years, and then all of a sudden to read something that takes it in a different direction, I think it just made me rebel against it because I didn't like it. This is something else. I really enjoyed this one. I highly recommend it if you like darker stuff. It's good. Now, next is a trilogy that I blazed through. It was not on the TBR, it was on my want to read because Stephen King has a new book coming out in September called Holly. It is about the character Holly Gibney, who is birthed in the Bill Hodges trilogy by Stephen King. So I had some time for an audiobook, so I got Mr. Mercedes from my library on Libby. Will Patton is the narrator, and he does an amazing job. This is a crime thriller trilogy. There is something that happens in the 3rd book that kind of twists that a little bit, but for the most part, it's just a murder mystery. If you are twisted like me and you love stories about serial killers, that is what happens in Mr. Mercedes. We start off the very first chapter, maybe a prologue, with the Mercedes massacre. Brady Hartsfield steals a Mercedes and he plows through a line of people who are standing outside a job fair waiting, and that's how it starts. What I love about it is Stephen King starts each of the following 2 books in the trilogy with that same massacre, but it's from a different point of view, and I just thought that was so clever. I just really loved it. So in the first one, we have the serial killer, Mr. Mercedes, and they decide to taunt Detective Bill Hodges, who has been retired for about 6 months, and he decides he is going to catch this person. So that's the first book. Now, the second book has a much slower pace. Like I mentioned, we start with that Mercedes massacre. This time, we are following the Saubers family. This one is a much slower pace, and I think a lot of people who read Mr. Mercedes that don't give this one as high of a rating is because of that pacing. I love the in-depth character development that we got in this one. A lot of reviews that I saw about this one also dinged it because Detective Bill Hodges from the first book, he doesn't show up until later on in this one. I didn't care. I was so wrapped up in this one because Stephen King did something that he also does really well. This one is about the murder of a famous author. The heart of it is, how important an author's writing can be to people, and I just absolutely loved it. Now, in the final book, End of Watch, Stephen King returned to that pacing that we found in the first one. Oh my goodness. I was so sad when it was over. This author can write characters that I absolutely love. By the time I reached the end of this one, and because I've already read The Outsiders, which is the next book featuring Holly Gibney and her short story, If It Bleeds, these characters are important to me. Stephen King has a history of writing characters that are unforgettable, that are so important to me, that I just absolutely love, like the Dark Tower Quartet. I don't know that any group of characters is ever going to beat that found family group, but these sure tried. I just absolutely loved it. If at all possible, I'm going to try to reread The Outsiders and the short story If It Bleeds, just to be fresh and ready for when Holly comes out. Oh man, I just can't wait. Each book in this trilogy, I rated 5 stars. I just finished End of Watch the other day. I need to sit down and write that review. By the time this video goes up, I should have the written review for this one. I already have it for these two. I will put a link to all of my written reviews for all the books that I've completed down in the description box below. Hopefully by the time this video goes up, I'll have one for End of Watch, but all 3 books, 5 stars. Excellent trilogy. I would highly recommend it. And I believe that is all of my completed physical reads. Let's talk about what I read on my Kindle, because I'll be honest, I went home for several weeks. I had to pack a lot. There was no way I was packing any physical books. I know that's blasphemy, but y'all, if y'all saw how packed that Jeep was, there was nothing else going in there. First up, I completed one of my SPFBO 9 reads for my team, Team Bookborn. I read The Fae of Castle Garden by Naomi P. Cohen. A quick reminder, SPFBO 9 reads that I am judging for Team Bookborn, we withhold those star ratings until a later phase when a finalist or semifinalist has been chosen. So I don't have a rating to share with you, but I did absolutely love this book. I knew that I would when I read the book description. It opens up, we're in New York City, 1859. It is the night of Samhain. Our main character, Sophia, is a musician, and she has been invited as a mortal to attend a party where the Fae of New York City and the Wild Hunt come together to spend the evening dancing and passing the night away, celebrating and keeping the peace. All things seem to be progressing nicely and well until an emissary of the Fairy Queen's court comes in and says that there has been a murder. It turns out that it was a mortal mage who was murdered, one who had not been publicly claimed yet, but had entered an agreement to join with the Wild Hunt. As you can imagine, outrage is sparked between the Wild Hunt and the Fairy Queen, and that's how we get our start. Some of the things I really enjoyed about this were learning about the different Fae. There are types of mortals. They're not mages per se, but they have one single ability and they're called blessed. But because they only have one ability, their families hide them. They're embarrassed of them. And I found out that there is another novel that's set in this world. I believe it's a prequel where we learn more about the Blessed. I cannot wait to read that one. I'm absolutely going to read that one. I love the character work. I love the setting. I really enjoyed the author's writing style. I love the murder mystery of who was killing all of the mages in New York City. It's fantasy, but it has so many other elements that are enjoyable to read that I think it would appeal to a wide range of readers. After I finished The Fae of Castle Garden, I picked up Deathless Beasts by Andrew D. Meredith. I got about 12 chapters in and I did put this one down. This one, I was really confused in the beginning. There's a lot of characters and places. We have what feels like is going to be a very in-depth religious system. There were many ranks. There's many different vows that each of these ranks of paladins can take. Several of the titles were long. We have the male half, we have the female half. There was so much information being thrown that really wasn't getting explained in depth for me to keep track of. It may have been one of those that I was not in the right environment to read. You know, I was reading at home in Mississippi. I wasn't here where I could spread index cards out on my desk and write different characters and write everything down and just have like the vision board of what's going on as the story was being built. But at any rate, I put that one down, and the author has another series that they've written that I've heard is completely different. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pause on this one right now, and I'm going to try the other series first and see what I think about that one. It could be that's more my speed than this particular series. So I'm pausing on Deathless Beast right now to try the other series. I cannot remember the name of the other series, but you're going to be hearing about it next month, so stay tuned for that. Next on the list is a science fiction novel called The Demons That Save Us. It is the second book in author Maximilian Lopez's series Echoes of Ethereum. I ate this one up. I really loved the first one. I really loved the second one, but for different reasons, and then some of the same reasons. The characters are everything. You meet all these characters in the first book, and they don't seem like the type that would form a close found family friend group, but it just works. It just works. And the whole concept, the plot of this series is when you go to sleep and you dream, something about your brain waves connects, lines up with, rarely, but it does happen, another alternate reality. It's a very interesting take on the multiverse. And you connect with that you in another alternate reality, and you see how you might live had you made different choices. And it's so interesting. So these characters learn that they're able to connect with other versions of themselves in book one. And there's a whole thing that goes on there. And then in book two, we meet another version of these characters and how they connect with each other and start communicating. It's so good. It's so good. I am sad because I read the arc and I'm already wishing I had book three in my hands, because I just absolutely love this series. Just absolutely love it. I stayed up late to finish it last night, so at time of filming I haven't written my review, but by the time this goes up that'll be out, and of course it's down in the description below. What else did I read? I'm still continuing my slow progress through Dracula using the Dracula Daily emails. That's been fun to do that. Dracula Daily, for those of you who aren't aware, it is an email service you sign up for that starts, I want to say, on May 3rd, and it continues through sometime in November. Each email you get matches the date of the entry from Jonathan Harker and various other things that happen in this book. It's a really cool way to read this classic, especially if you're someone like me who just can't sit and read this type of novel in a chunk because of the way it's written. So definitely would recommend. I'll be reminding everybody next April to sign up for this service when it starts on May 3rd so you don't miss out. And speaking of classics, I've got another really interesting thing I'm reading here regarding Shakespeare. I was very fortunate to be offered the ARC for an anthology called Shakespeare Unlimited. It's edited by James Aquilone. What these authors did is created horror short stories and poems based on the works of Shakespeare. I've read about half a dozen short stories and poems so far, and I have really loved the take on these, and I hope to start sharing some of the opinions and thoughts and quotes for some of these that I've read. I like to share little mini reviews on my Instagram and different social medias. I was just lazy and chose not to do any of that while I was in Mississippi, so I gotta get caught up on that, but I've really been enjoying that collection. I started A Crown of Swords by Robert Jordan, book 7 in The Wheel of Time. I think I'm a little over 100 pages in so far, which, for those of you who know, that's the prologue. Since I took a 2-week or maybe 3-week break from reading the series, it's been a nice refresher. Honestly, the prologue is a series recap of what's happened so far, so it got all of that fresh in my memory. Now I've just entered into the newest leg of the journey of these characters, and a bunch of them are together right now, so I always love when some of that original crew from the first book, The Eye of the World, get back together in a group. It's fun to see how they interact with each other as they grow up and as they're experiencing all of the different things that they're experiencing throughout this series, just how they've matured and grown into these different people over everything that's happened. I mean, if you were in this series and some of these things happened to you, it would absolutely change your life forever. And just how they're able to have the courage, although sometimes they don't have the courage to keep going. It's other things that keep them going. It's good to be back. This is one that I've always historically enjoyed in the series, so I'm looking forward into delving into that one more as the week progresses. So let's talk about what I'm going to be reading next. I have my Joan Didion nonfiction essay that I'm going to read called James Pike, American. I don't know who James Pike is, so that should be fun and educational. I will be reading my next short story that is in line with my Dresden Files reread. I'm rereading all of the books, but I am reading the short stories and the graphic novels where they go in chronological order. So I Was a Teenage Bigfoot is next, and I have a feeling I know who that's going to be about. I really enjoyed their short story a few months ago, so I'm looking forward to seeing more from them. My next book that I'm going to start is Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wong. I was fortunate enough, the author sent me the ARC for that one. I'm going to try and get that one read as quickly as possible. It comes out, I want to say, on July 25th. That means your girl is going to need to sit down and do some serious reading. I want to do my best to read that one, have my review ready, so you all can decide if it's one you want to pre-order or get on release date. It's M.L. Wong. Of course you're going to want it if you've read The Sword of Kaigan. That book was just a masterpiece. One that just saying the title has an impact on my heart. I really went through some things reading that book. I cried so much, and I just can't imagine. I bet if I were a mother, I would have been even more impacted by that story. It was beautiful. But even the mother aspect aside, I am married, I have a husband, and what happened with a couple in that story, oh my gosh, it was beautiful. And now I've talked myself into wanting to reread that one. This is not going well for my TBR. That is everything that I have read over these last few weeks, what I've got coming up. Thank you all so much for bearing with me as I went through 3 weeks worth of reading. I have all of the written reviews down below if you want a little bit more detail about each of the books that I finished. Have a fantastic rest of your Friday, a wonderful weekend, and I'll catch you in the next one.